All right, well, it's about that time, so we will go ahead and get things started here. Sis, are we good to go? All right. So, as I said at the top, my name is Eugene Ward. You may also know me as Eugene the author, and I am so grateful for you guys being out here today. It's hot, it's early, you could have been anywhere, but you chose to be here, and I appreciate that. Before we get things started with the class proper, I'd like, some of us know each other, some of us don't, so I'd like us to go around and just share your name, what you like to write, where you are in your journey, and something interesting about yourself.
Georgetown Fantasy Adventure, and I just started this journey this year.
Awesome.
My name is Michael McGee. I've been screenwriting now for about 4 years. I took it up during COVID when we were all trapped in our homes, and I'm enjoying it. It's fun being in a little fantasy world all the time. Trying to write a story rather than watching the news. So.
I hear that.
It's a fantasy of the wrong kind.
Yeah, exactly.
My name is Sean Balin. I'm new to Arizona and pretty new to screenwriting. I started it last year when I knew I'd be heading out here to give myself something to do, something interesting.
Okay, nice. Welcome to the heat.
Yeah.
James Doherty. So I do screenplays. I'm a technical writer during the day, and as a hobby, I do screenwriting.
Nice, it's awesome.
James Quinones. I've been doing writing on and off, and I like to do science fiction and fantasy.
Okay, awesome, welcome.
My name is Luis Quinones. I self-published in 2017. I co-wrote a couple of streaming projects, a couple of features. I'm still learning the craft.
Okay, fantastic.
Oh, Mitch Davies. I've been here about 30 years. I self-published 4 novels. I'm in the middle of a trilogy right now. I wrote a pilot for a screenplay a few years ago, and I'm very curious about character development techniques, etc.
Awesome. Yeah, character is what drives the narrative. It's all part of the vehicle that fuels the human condition that is our narrative experience. Well, welcome everybody. It's awesome to see so many of you guys here and across varying stages in your journey. This is gonna have to be my pointer. I thought I grabbed it in the bag and I didn't. So this is The Art of Character, crafting living, breathing characters with depth and authenticity with myself, Eugene the author. So to start, who am I, right? Like, who's this guy who's coming here trying to give you guys a workshop? I'm Eugene the author. I have 5 published novels that are across multiple genres. Those novels are Tribus Dulce, coming of age young adult superhero drama, urban fantasy. Blue Butterfly Noir. It's a coming-of-age thriller set in Japan with a Sudanese protagonist. Comfort and Joy in the Abyss, cosmic horror, fantasy, romance, mystery. And the Nora and the Eternal Water Wheel series, young adult high fantasy, urban fantasy fiction. So I'm an author across multiple genres. I specialize in horror, fantasy, sci-fi, speculative fiction, romance, and mystery. I have 4 more new releases coming Q4 of this year and Q1 of next year. And I have 22 completed and unreleased novels and more than 300 projects in production. ADD brain.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, no, there's literally never a point in time that I'm not thinking about novels and stories and screenplays and narrative. Like, I live in it at all times. I also want to say, I have a housekeeping section in a bit, but I also want to say, as you guys can tell, I like to keep things a little bit casual here. I don't believe that there is any such thing as a dumb question, right? You don't know what you don't know. So feel free to ask literally anything about the journey. Raise your hand or call out if you have a question about anything I've said. Comment, like, we're here to be friends and to be excited. So my screenplay journey actually began, well, it began in earnest 3 years ago. It began about a decade before that, when I was entirely too precious about my projects, and I was like, everything in the novel has to be exactly in the screenplay. That doesn't work. So I joined the Phoenix Screenwriting Association, attending the conference in 2022. And that was my exposure, that was my crash course. I was able to learn under some of the greats in the industry, Bob Saenz, Pilar Alessandra, and started to really hone my craft from there. Some of my completed screenplays are The Murrah Effect, which is a neo-noir thriller, One Loose Step, which is a John Wickian revenge thriller, A Storm of Jade, which is a period piece high fantasy, Frost, which I've co-wrote with my buddy Mike over there, which is a social conscious horror story. So I was also the 2023 quarterfinalist in IFF New York's International Screenwriting Competition with my debut screenplay. 2024 nominee for the Rep Your Brand Entrepreneur of the Year. Fingers crossed, we'll find out in October if I won. I was a panel guest at Camelback High School, panelist at the University of Alaska Anchorage 2 years running, panelist at the Minute Tomorrow. So where am I? Feel free to take out your phone, snap a photo if you want. This will pop up again at the end, but this is where you can get a hold of me. I am Eugene the Author pretty much everywhere. So at Eugene the Author on social media. I have 2 YouTube channels, Eugene the Author Gaming, which is a channel where not only do I play games, but I also break down the narrative experience, the design theory, and all those other aspects that go into game design. I have a main author channel that I'll be relaunching in about 2 weeks now that'll have probably daily uploads. They'll vary from a couple of minute uploads answering questions about the journey and the craft to more long form 20-minute, half an hour videos. I also have a podcast that's going to be starting next month, and that'll be available on all the expected platforms, right? Spotify, Apple Music, the whole nine. So some housekeeping. We already took care of a lot of the housekeeping, but if you could, please silence your phones. Feel free to take your notes on whatever medium that you want to. There are pens and pads, notebooks for anybody who doesn't have anything to take notes on, and please avail yourself of the candy, but do make sure that we throw the trash away on our way out. I think that's it. So you guys ready to dive in?
Yeah.
So we're gonna do this workshop in 2 stages. The first is going to be examining examples of deconstruction across narrative. And the next stage is going to be an interactive section. I should say a more interactive section, because I'm going to be interacting with you guys the whole time, but a more interactive section where we're going to actually go through, we're going to take the protagonist of Nora and the Eternal Water Wheel, and we're going to break down 4 levels of depth to character development. So starting with the power of narrative. How many of you guys have seen a movie, a TV show, read a book, heard a song, and had it deeply, deeply impact you on a personal level? And it just meant so much to you. And you can't wait to share that joy and that experience, or that sorrow, or that anger, or whatever it made you feel with somebody. And you kind of get this kind of dismissive reaction of like, I mean, come on, it's just a movie. It's just a show. It's just a game. Like, what are you doing? Nothing is ever just a game, just a movie, just a TV show. All right, when we're selling screenplays, we're not just selling a document. We're not selling a manuscript. We're selling an experience. And it's a deeply personal one, right? It's a deeply personal part of who you are, part of your journey, part of your human experience and the way you see the world. And narrative is successful because it connects with us on an emotional level. And we trade in the currencies of time and emotion. And there are 2 of the most powerful things that we can possibly interact with. Time, for example, is the one resource you can never get more of. And as such, they ought to be the most respected things when we go into our craft and we go into what we do. And that's not to say that everything needs to be War and Peace, right? You gotta have your Expendables with your Tolstoys, but we also need to make sure that we are crafting our experiences with purpose, intent, and care. So I wanna introduce you guys to a guy by the name of Tom Kalinske. Has anybody heard of Tom Kalinske before? Yo, that's what's up. You're a gamer?
Yeah.
That's what's up. Okay, I see you. So Tom Kalinske is the former co-CEO of Mattel and the former president of Sega of America. Some of the things he's responsible for are the continued existence of Barbie, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Trust me, there's a reason. The creation of He-Man, saving Sonic the Hedgehog, and he was known for saying we're selling emotions, not products. Now, a little bit about this Barbie part and why it's important. When Tom Kalinske was up and coming at Mattel, he gets called into this executive's office one day, and she sits him down and she says, Tom, Bobby's over. She's dead. She's done with. That's what they're telling me. What do you say? Now, Tom knew that this was a very important question and a very important turning point in his career, and he had no idea what he was going to say. He had no idea what he was supposed to say. So he just sat back smiling and hoping that she would keep talking. So she goes, all right, Tom, you're handsome, you're charismatic, you know it, that's not gonna get you anywhere with me. Talk. And Tom thought about it. And he said, Barbie is over? Are you kidding me? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Barbie is going to outlast you, she's gonna outlast me, she's gonna outlast all of us. Because Barbie is not just a doll, albeit an attractive one. Barbie is not just a toy. She's a companion, she's a friend, she's a vehicle for creativity and possibility. Barbie is a dream, she is a philosophy, she is an ideology. And if we leverage that, I promise you, Barbie will continue forever. So, Tom began an initiative to rebrand Barbie. And he began the initiative to have her be the vehicle to teach little girls all around the world to reach further and to be what they oftentimes are told they couldn't be. So he made Dr. Barbie, he made the Adventure Line Barbie, Scientist Barbie, President Barbie. In addition, Tom also spearheaded the initiative to add more diversity to the Barbie line. So with all of these things together in this concept of the power of narrative and the power of emotion, he took a dying franchise and he turned it into one of the biggest, most recognizable brands in the world through the power of character and narrative. Now, show of hands, you already know these characters, but show of hands, those of you who aren't gamers, everybody in the room, who knows this character on the left? Who's at least seen this character on the left? Who knows who this guy on the right is? Who in this room can tell me at least one thing about the guy on the left? Right, what can you tell me about the guy on the left?
Fast, hot-headed, full of energy. Yeah, free-spirited.
Now, without going off of the attributes that you can guess from the design, what can you tell me about the guy on the right? There's a reason Sonic the Hedgehog has endured to this day, to the point of becoming such a big franchise that Keanu Reeves was chomping at the bits to play the villain in the new movie. And there's a reason why nobody remembers who Crash Bandicoot is, and that is the power of character, authenticity, and narrative. Who knows the guy on the left? Who remembers the guy on the right? Who not only saw this image on the left, but felt this image, heard this image, right? If I were to say, what is this character's catchphrase, who thinks they could say it? Really, nobody?
Was it the power of Grayskull?
By the power of Grayskull, I have the power! Meanwhile, poor Galtar and his golden lance relegated to the bargain bin knockoff DVD section at the end of the grocery store. Because again, when Tom Kalinske and his team made He-Man, Tom understood He-Man had to be more than a toy. I mean, it was Mattel, right? The goal was to sell toys, that's what the company does. But to sell that toy, he had to create a narrative. He had to create a figure that had depth, that had the capacity to be both memorable and compelling, to connect on an emotional level with the young boys that he was targeting for this character. So you have the He-Man cartoon show, you have the video games, you have the toys, you have the posters, you have the comic books. There's a whole universe around Masters of the Universe that endures to this day. Whether you like the portrayals or not, He-Man endures to this day, She-Ra endures to this day. There's new series coming out every couple of years. So regardless, the power of narrative and emotion carried this series on. So let's talk more about that, the power and depth of emotion. Action is memorable, emotion is compelling. And there's an important difference between those two. The Incredible Hulk is memorable, Bruce Banner is compelling. Iron Man is memorable, Tony Stark is compelling. Godzilla Cross Kong was a memorable action movie. Godzilla -1 was a compelling movie. Shots fired, sorry, not sorry. Emotion's the vehicle that fuels the human experience, right? At the end of the day, everything that we interact with, everything that we journey through, everything that we view our world through, whether it's our ideology, whether it's our culture, whether it's our, oh, it's locked. Everything that we experience and interact with in the world is viewed through the lens of our emotion, right? People will not often remember what you've done, but they will always remember how you've made them feel. And that's what we want to capture with our characters and with our narratives. They may not remember every single narrative beat of your screenplay, of your novel, of your TV show, but they will always remember how that made them feel. So how do we actually create these compelling characters? Well, one important thing to remember is your character is more than their attributes. Who's familiar with the website TV Tropes? Awesome, awesome. So if you've not gone to TV Tropes, I recommend you check it out. And it's a website where you can look up darn near any TV show, movie, video game, book, etc. And it'll provide a list of every single trope that's in this story. Now I want to be clear, tropes get a bad rap, right? You hear all the time like, oh, these same old tired tropes. It's relying on these same tired tropes. Tropes aren't a bad thing, right? I mean, you can't make something that doesn't have a trope of some kind, right?
What do you mean by trope?
Yeah. So a trope is the idea that like, let's see. So, break your cutie is a trope, and it's the idea if you have this adorable protagonist, this sweet protagonist that's endeared to the audience, and then you put them through hell, and you break their heart, and you break their spirit, and it's how you subvert the expectation that this cutesy thing is going to be just fun frolicking, and instead you transition it to darker territory, subverting audience expectations. Another trope is bury your gays, and we're thankfully moving away from that trope being a thing, but it used to be you could only have an LGBT protagonist in a story if you were going to also kill them off by the end of the story. So that's another example of a trope. Beauty is never tarnished. You see that in most action films, and there's the male inverse, handsome is never tarnished, where you have your attractive main character who is going through all manner of fistfights and explosions and the whole 9 yards, and they're the only person in the movie who still looks like they just got out the shower and put on their clothes. So those are a few examples of tropes. But tropes are just attributes, right? You're cut off? Oh. Well, bear with me one moment. Let me grab a charger here.
While she sets it up, one of the tropes I always have trouble with is like a John Wick movie where he can defeat 60, 80 bad guys.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting you bring up John Wick, right? So I'll be brief on my soapbox here. One of the things that appealed to me about the first John Wick film was the idea that it was pursuing realism in an action film in a way that you don't typically see in American action cinema. And then John Wick 2 came out and he got that gosh darn everything proof suit coat. And right, you gotta suspend your disbelief by degrees when you're engaging in these kinds of narratives, but you're doing this and you're stopping assault rifles? Come on. And so not everything is for every audience. And I had to kind of accept for me personally that from John Wick 2 on, he's not just a normal guy, he's basically an Avenger, right? So it depends on the story that you're viewing, the story that you're working on. Sometimes you gotta suspend your disbelief. One of the ways that you can help your audience with that though, and I think it's one of the things that John Wick struggled with and didn't quite stick the landing on, is establish the rules of your world and stick with them, right? So you look at, who's seen Sin City? Oh, you guys gotta see Sin City. So,
Going on the list.
yeah, so Sin City, all of your protagonists, with the exception of one antagonist, are human. But we understand from the beginning, human in this world means something very different. And they make that very clear as these humans are surviving things they shouldn't be able to survive. So by the halfway point, when you've got Marv get hit by a car 5 times, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, like human's not human in this world. But there's also still risk and escalation that they put through the narrative, so you still have stakes. And so you can get away with a lot as long as you establish the rules of your universe and then you stick to them. And if you're gonna break them, make sure you do it with elegance and nuance. So make your character a person, not a list of things. Their experiences and how they relate to them will inform how they relate to the narrative, and in turn, how the narrative relates to your audience. Depth, authenticity, and consistency are the vehicles that holistically create characters and narratives that are both memorable and impactful. Now, when we're talking about this depth, and we're talking about this compelling and memorable, certain kinds of movies probably come to mind. You may be thinking about Citizen Kane, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, these stories that are known for being these deep, turn of the century classics, But what if I challenged you to find emotional depth in an uncanny place? What if I told you that surprisingly a movie that had a scene that has impacted me to the point that I think about it at least once a week on an emotional level was The Goonies? Seems a little bit outlandish, right? Now, silly question, but bear with me. How many of you have heard of The Goonies? How many of you have watched The Goonies? How many of you didn't see the Goonies until your adulthood? Really? Okay, more than I thought, more than I thought. All right, I've been getting dragged by my friends for years I didn't see the Goonies until I was in my mid-20s. I didn't really grow up with a lot of the typical American movies, so I didn't see Terminator till I was older, movies like that. So when I saw the Goonies, I didn't have the same big cultural impact that it had for a lot of people, and the impact that it had throughout the world, right? It was an enjoyable movie. And if I were to ask you guys, what's a memorable scene from the Goonies? Let's just try this out. What's a memorable scene from the Goonies? Anybody?
The kid that says, "Hey, you guys."
Yeah. Okay.
So at the end of the movie, that Spanish galleon is sailing out.
Yeah. That's an awesome shot. Anyone else?
Sliding down the water slide. I only vaguely remember it, but.
Yeah, that was a great scene. That was a great scene. You might hear people reference the truffle shuffle. You might hear the sticky stuff when the Asian kid's got the camera that shoots out the oil slick. But the scene that was most memorable for me came from the character that you wouldn't have expected it from. Now this character, Craig, he's your typical young boy lead from the era, right? He's your hot shot, he's your bad boy, he's your punk, he's getting everybody into trouble all the time, he's got a mouth on him, that's why his nickname is Mouth. He learned Spanish just to pick up chicks and insult people so they wouldn't know what he was saying. He's very immature, right? And we go through this movie through this very flat character arc, which is typical of family narratives. Flat character arc. And a flat character arc, for anyone who's not familiar with the term, means your character is the same from the beginning to the middle to the end. They don't grow as a character. The world around them is where the growth and depth comes from. But all of that led to one particular scene that subverted all those expectations that I had in a big way. And is a scene that I think about, like I said, at least once a week. From the punk, from the rogue, from the guy who doesn't care about anything. And with this one soliloquy, we have subverted, reversed, and irrevocably transformed everything we thought we knew about this character. And when we go back and we think about all of his behavior leading up to this point, his selfishness, his attention seeking, it starts to make a little bit more sense why this kid's the way he is. So even in something as flat as a family movie, a kid's adventure movie, you can still inject moments that are both memorable and compelling. Now we're gonna briefly deconstruct a few other compelling scenes and quotes. Who is familiar with the movie Gattaca? Add it to your list. Gattaca is in my top 10 movies of all time. Briefly, Gattaca is about a world we actually could be approaching, where in this world we have made advances in gene and cell modification to the point that we can eradicate all of the irregularities, all the deformities, all the, quote, disabilities in the world. so that all of the children born going forward will be perfect. So those that were natural births before this point in time, they occupy a lower place in society. They're going to be janitors. They're going to be people that are looked down upon. They're going to be people that will never be able to accomplish their dreams and their goals and ambitions because they're going up against these perfect people. So we've got our protagonist, Vincent, who is born with poor eyesight. He has to wear glasses. He has asthma. He has various other health conditions. And his dream is to be an astronaut. This kid who gets winded going down the stairs, he dreams about being an astronaut. Meanwhile, his brother, Anton, is the perfect son, genetically modified to be born to be the pinnacle of humanity. There's another quote in the movie where, as Vincent is narrating his life and his experiences, where he says, "And then was born my brother Anton, a son who was worthy of my father's name." Now, one of the things that Vincent and Anton would do growing up, and Anton knew that Vincent couldn't go the distance, and so this was a cruel way to keep Vincent in his place, but also from Anton's perspective was to keep his older brother safe, to remind him, don't reach too far because you're not going to make it. So they would go down to the coast and they would go for a swim. And whoever turned back first lost. And at a certain point, Vincent would always get afraid. He'd get short of breath. He wouldn't be able to do it. And he'd turn and swim back to the shore. And he would just sit there. And Anton had already proved his point, but Anton would just keep swimming, as if to make certain Vincent knew his place. Well, I won't spoil the whole movie for you, but I will say, as Vincent enacts a very elaborate plan to be able to pursue his dreams, he is confronted by his brother, and it's all about to fall apart. And so he goes, one more swim, one last race, and if I beat you, you leave me alone and you let me do what I'm here to do. And they go, and they're swimming, and they're swimming, and they're swimming, and Anton, we gotta turn back. Vincent keeps swimming. Anton, we gotta turn back. Vincent, we gotta turn back. Vincent keeps swimming. And Anton reaches his limits while Vincent continues to outswim him. And Anton screams, how are you doing this? How have you done any of this? You wanna know how I did it? This is how I did it, Anton. I never saved anything for the swim back. Memorable and compelling, because he's, of course, not just talking about the physical swim. He's saying, I reached a point in my life where even if it killed me, I wasn't going to hold back anymore. As Vincent goes on his journey and he is working towards his dreams, his dream of being an astronaut, he begins establishing these emotional connections and these bonds. And he begins to wonder, for someone who was never meant for this world, I'm suddenly having a hard time leaving it. Of course, they say every atom in our bodies was once part of a star. Maybe I'm not leaving. Maybe I'm going home. Quotes are memorable not just because they're good, but because of the way they make us feel, as they build upon everything leading up to those moments. Who's seen the movie Antlers? Trigger warning if you watch it. It's billed as a horror movie, and it is, but the horror is not just the monster. The real horror was man, and the abuse that man enacts on others. And as Paul's older sister Julie, she's come back to their hometown. She's on hard times. She's living with him while she's getting back on her feet. She's a school teacher. They come across this malnourished boy in her class who she suspects is being neglected. They go through and they're kind of trying to work with this boy and take care of this boy. All the while we have these monsters looming in the background of our narrative. And Julie's got a problem with a very sharp tongue. She's very cutting in the way that she deals with her brother and the people around her. She endured a lot of abuse when she was younger, and so she has this mentality that everybody's out to get her and nobody understands what she's been through and what the world is like. And Paul is largely a flat character, right? Paul's the nice guy. He's long-suffering, he's kind, he's a little bit bumbling, he's kind of looked down upon, but he's just got that smile and he's a cheerful guy, flat character arc. Until we reach a point where Julie says one thing too many. And Julie's in his face and she's yelling at him and she's going off on him and she's, of course you don't understand. Of course you want me to back down. Of course you want the system to take care of this kid. You don't know what it's like. You didn't go through what I went through. You could never understand. And she's berating him and she's berating him. And the scene is all the more powerful because Paul doesn't yell at her, but he looks her in the eyes and he says, how can you say that? You don't know what he did to me, Julie. You don't know what Dad did to me. You abandoned me. You left. And just like that, a flat character arc is suddenly injected with emotion, with stakes, and it makes you go back and re-examine every scene with this character. And in a movie with a giant, scary Wendigo monster, this becomes a scene that you may not remember this scene, but you'll remember how you felt when Paul stood up to his sister. Anybody seen The Raid? Add it to your list. So the first movie is The Raid Redemption, second movie is The Raid 2. Go figure. Now, American action movies are beginning to learn from foreign cinema, and they're beginning to inject more narrative and more character development and more growth. But all of that came from Indonesia, Korea, Japan, China, so on and so forth. And while The Raid is a non-stop action thrill ride, and The Raid 2 is a more somber, but still has some amazing action set pieces. Look up the recording diary on how they filmed the highway fight scene. Those people are lucky to be alive. One of the things that we have is this quiet moment where we have our protagonist, Rama. He has to go underground with the criminal organization responsible for the death of his brother and the deconstruction of his family. He's losing himself more and more and more. And his job is to protect the son of the head gangster in Indonesia, to get close to them so that they can take down the criminal ring. Meanwhile, the son is doing your typical Shakespearean journey, where he's, why won't you give me the power? Why won't you make me the boss? Why won't you make me the leader? You don't respect me, you look down upon me. And he has this quiet moment with Prakoso. And Prakoso's trying to get the son to understand, your father loves you, but you're not ready. They don't fear your father anymore, but they respect him. He's still got that fire in his belly, but he understands that's true power. I'm actually not going to talk about this when I want you guys to see the movie for yourself, but just remember this scene. And the last one before we get to the next clip here is, who here has seen First Blood, which is the first Rambo movie? What's the most memorable line from that movie? The one you see parodied all the time, you see it referenced all the time. Anyone? Maybe it wasn't that memorable.
Can we win this time?
Was it?
Can we win this time?
No, they drew First Blood, not me.
Yeah, that's one. That's one. What's another one? Nothing is over! And you see that scene parodied all the time, right? But I encourage you, and I'm not going to show it here because it delves into some topics that are some trigger warnings, but I strongly encourage you, hop on YouTube and look up the whole monologue. And before I say where this quote comes from, a little bit of interesting background. The original Rambo First Blood movie, when it was originally filmed, was actually over 3 hours long. And when Stallone saw the final product, he hated the film so much that he wanted to buy the movie, the rights, the negatives, and burn it all to the ground so nobody would ever see it. The original movie was very schlocky. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Commando is one of my favorite films, but it was a Commando-esque film. It was one-liners, it was silly, it was just sensational to be sensational, and Stallone was so upset. And something that he fought for, tooth and nail, and he somehow managed to win, probably because he was hot on the heels of another very lucrative win, so he had a little bit more clout in the industry, was he made them go back, and in addition to cutting the runtime down, he made them go back and cut out all of Rambo's dialogue except for that last monologue. In addition, Rambo was supposed to die at the end. He was supposed to go out and be shot to death by the cops. And Stallone was quoted as saying, "Why would I want to make that kind of movie? I see soldiers and veterans every day who have gone and given everything, who are chewed up and spat out by this system. And you want me to make a movie that's going to tell them there's nothing good for them so they should just go kill themselves? That's not the kind of movie that I want to make." So he fought for First Blood's ending to not only have Rambo survive, but to have it end on this incredibly powerful, impactful, emotional note. And then to normalize male grieving, to redefine masculinity and have the last scene you see to have this indestructible soldier sobbing like a baby, and his commanding officer not knowing what to do and what to say and just hold him instead. And the most memorable line for me from that dialogue is the moment that Rambo breaks. He sits back and he's, oh God, where is everybody? As he's remembering his brothers in arms that he lost in a horrific manner right before his very eyes. In an action movie where the main character doesn't say a single word till the end. What did I just do? All right. So again, your character is more than their attributes. Make your character a person, not a list of things. Their experiences and how they relate to them inform how they relate to the narrative, and in turn how the narrative relates to your audience. Depth, authenticity, and consistency are the vehicle that holistically create characters and narratives that are both memorable and impactful. Now, moving on from that incredibly dark note, let's talk about another movie where you can find depth and uncanny places.